if Harry and Meghan and the kids can come back to the UK, that is a huge, huge accomplishment for them, and not without massive political risk to Charles, because this is so incredibly unpopular.
In the words of the hit Netflix rom-com, nobody wants this.
When they leaked all this stuff saying, oh, actually now suddenly we can't come because we haven't got our Ravex security, it just felt like a really blatant attempt to kind of emotionally blackmail Charles into intervening in the security decisions of the British state. A lot of this is coming from Meghan. They don't really want security, they really want status.
There's a lot of getting high on the fumes of their own victimhood. Charles must believe that making peace with Harry is the best thing for the monarchy.
Well, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tom Sykes. This is The Royalist. We are thrilled to have you with us. What a week it has been. My goodness, it has been absolutely bonkers in the royal news firmament. I have to say, my phone has not stopped buzzing and hopping, people in one ear and out the other. Harry and Meghan, what on earth is going on? What are they up to? What is going on at the palace? We've all been trying to figure it out for the last few days. And what's so extraordinary about this story is the way that everything just keeps changing. Just one moment it's this, the next moment it's that. One moment they're coming, the next moment they're not. So we've got Bosch on later to help us figure it all out. As I say, it's been a crazy, crazy week. I've been hard at work on my book, which I'm incredibly excited to be announcing in, I think, next week. I'll be able to tell you the title and show you the cover and all of that, and I'm super excited. So I can't wait, and thank you so much for all your support and all your nice comments. We read all of your comments that come in. As you know, if you're a regular, I'm always here in the comments, chatting away and getting involved. And for me, it's so important to see that you're loving it and you're enjoying it. And also, you're actually my secret focus group. So if there's stuff that you want me to cover or you want to hear about, or you want to hear more about, let me know in those comments. Right, without further ado, let's get into today's show. And here is our royal rundown. So first up in the royal rundown, our royal news update. Princess Catherine needed to get away from it all this weekend, and who could blame her? Then it'll be time for Tea with Tom. And Prince William shared some lovely memories about drinking tea with the late Queen. And, well, Tea with Tom, we have to cover that. And then our royal insider, Alison Boshoff, the one and only, is with me to pass the biggest royal story of the year. Harry and Meghan's cynical attempt to emotionally blackmail an ailing King Charles into giving them security. Right, well, without further ado, let's get into our royal news update. We begin with the Princess of Wales, lovely, lovely Catherine, who this weekend pulled off something no member of the royal family has ever managed before. She managed to get away from them all. She spent the weekend climbing what's known as the Three Peaks Challenge, which is the three highest mountains in England, Scotland and Wales. They're very underwhelming by American standards, but they're, Ben Nevis, Scafell Pike and Snowdon, and you have to do the whole thing in under 24 hours for the Three Peaks Challenge. And she did it. And it's actually pretty cool. And the lovely photos of her going up the mountain, bumping into other groups of climbers. She set off on Saturday. And by the time she finished, she had become the first member of the royal family ever to complete the national Three Peaks Challenge. So she marked it with a post, quite a long one, dedicated to everyone who has heard, in her words, the words no one wants to hear, i.e. talking about her cancer diagnosis that she got in 2024. She posted these photographs of her on the summit of Ben Nevis in her windproof jacket, very unglamorous, proper nasty Scottish weather. And I think what's very striking about this is that while all this other drama is going on that we're going to get into later with Harry and Meghan, it's very much keep calm and climb a mountain, and I think that people just really connect with her now. And I think that particularly, obviously, anyone who's been through cancer or had family or friends who've been through cancer, which is, let's face it, all of us, feel that kind of emotional, spiritual connection with her, that she's expressing, maybe not so much a connection with her, but that she's expressing that sort of emotional, spiritual side of recovery from cancer. And of course, as I say, we all at this stage know someone who's been through it or had family go through it. It has become a real theme for both her and Charles, and I think that they are becoming really brilliant advocates for it, because I do think that 20 years ago, if you were told that you had cancer, or you were told that a friend or family member had cancer, it was often considered terminal, and I think what they have made clear by their example at the very sort of height of the public service is that it's not at all these days. And all right, Catherine's in remission, she's cancer free. Charles, we know, still has cancer, but he seems to be living a pretty great life. And as I've reported on the Royalist, his doctors are really encouraged by how well he's doing. Lots of people around him think he could live out his natural lifespan. So good for Catherine. She is joint patron of the Royal Marsden Hospital. And she wrote, I thought quite movingly, about sort of finding balance between effort and acceptance. And it's a big few weeks coming up for her as well. Don't forget, we've got Wimbledon coming up in the next couple of weeks. And it's really, I think, a genuinely impressive weekend's work from the Princess of Wales, and a useful reminder that some members of the family spend their time climbing mountains for charity rather than briefing the newspapers all day. Okay, that's our royal news update. Now let's move on to Tea with Tom. Joining me this week is none other than Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, indeed, because the Prince of Wales, Prince William, has said that his late grandmother gave him a love of tea time that I didn't know I needed, as he contributed a personal video message to a digital memorial for Queen Elizabeth II. Now, tea, I should clarify, means different things in different jurisdictions. In England, it typically means a piece of toast, perhaps with some butter and jam on it, and a cup of tea at around about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, because I know what we'll really need in our lives is a fourth meal, right? Often with a slice of cake. Tea was a really important thing for Queen Elizabeth. It was, you could be invited to all the state dinners you liked, but when you were invited for tea, you knew that you'd really made it into the inner circle. And there was a private entrance at Buckingham Palace where you could go up, and really only her favourites, Sarah Chatto, people like that, would be invited for tea. But Prince William, of course, was a regular for tea when he was a student at Eton College, which is, I would say, it's about a 12-minute walk from Windsor Castle. You just go up Eton High Street, over the river, and then you're in Windsor Castle. And he would go there on Sunday afternoons for regular meetings with his grandmother, which were tea, but they were also king lessons, effectively, and they were incredibly influential in William's development, in his understanding of what his duties as monarch and indeed as Prince of Wales are. In fact, much greater influence on him than his father, who was quite a distant figure, shall we say, during his childhood and his teenage years, had other things on his mind, shall we say. So I think you can see it in this clip of William standing in Windsor Castle. He says, "It's a privilege to know the late Queen best than most. Some of my fondest memories of my grandmother are from here in Windsor. I remember many a quiet afternoon having tea with her and my grandfather at the castle, chatting, sharing stories, and seeing how completely at ease she was here, surrounded by family and her much-loved dogs and horses. To this day, she's given me a love of tea time that I never knew I needed." Well, absolutely. Tea, there can be nothing more magnificent to be associated with Queen Elizabeth II than a delicious cup of tea. And now it's time for our Royal Insider. Well, folks, now to the main event. I know it's what you've all been waiting for, and I'm delighted to say that our Royal Insider joining us this week is the one and only editor-at-large of the Daily Mail, Alison Boshoff, an amazing showbiz expert, an amazing Harry and Meghan expert, and I think there's nobody that I am looking forward to more having a real gossip to for the next half hour about what has happened with this Harry and Meghan tour to the United Kingdom, the on again, off again, on again tour. Just to catch up, those of you who've spent the last few days not following this, on Friday, the Sussex office sent the world's media a detailed operational note. And I'm sure Alison will stand by me on this. I mean, there's nothing more sacred in journalism, really, than an operational note. People don't publish them, people don't leak them. It's a precise minute-by-minute rundown of everything Meghan and Harry were doing. It said that the children were coming. It said Meghan and the children were coming back to Britain. It was the biggest royal story of the year. Obviously, it had been hyped for days and days before this. Finally, it's confirmed on Friday evening. 20 hours later, at 6 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, they blew it all up. A leak to The Sun saying that Meghan and the kids probably weren't coming after all because they'd been denied a security package. Although it was weird because the operational note said that they hadn't got security, but it was no obstacle and they were going to be able to figure it out. So that's where we are. And now, as we are recording this on Monday, and I can tell you that as of right now, Camp Sussex are saying that it's all going ahead as planned and that the operational note stands and that, everything's going to happen and everyone's working hard to make it happen exactly the way it happened. Alison, I mean, it's an extraordinary situation, isn't it? And you had an amazing report this week about how much planning and preparation and work had gone into this visit on both sides. And talk to us a bit about what you were able to discover about the arrangement, really, the accommodation that was being made with the Sussex to allow them to sort of geocache, I think was the word you used, their operations, and why it was such a shock when it all seemed to fall apart, and even more of a shock if it's all back on again now.
The crazy world of the Sussex just has got even crazier. You literally, I've never known any entity that can create this amount of chaos, media chaos, pure media chaos. So I spoke to someone who is friends with Harry and is a really, warm and great supporter of him, thinks he's a tremendous chap, all this kind of very kind of British, he's a good fellow, ism. And I didn't have great expectations of the talk. I said, can you tell me what's actually going to happen over the week or 6 days? And this person said, oh, well, it's mostly just going to be a low-key family visit, was the repeated phrase. I said, oh, okay. And then, he'll do Invictus just with Meghan, not the kids. I said, oh, okay, well, that's all interesting. And we were kind of going back and forth about, this is what, everybody really wants this, the king really wants this. I said, yes, but isn't there a problem? Because that tour in Australia, which we all remember, they were kind of cosplaying as royals, and then Meghan was selling the shirt she wore to go to the Bondi Beach Massacre Memorial. It was bad. It just kind of proved why the Sandringham Summit had said you can't be half in, half out. I said, how do they square that circle? And this guy said, and I do think he knows, he said that Harry's belief is that in some circles, not everyone is on board with this, in some circles, he's going to be allowed to draw a line. And what happens in the US and elsewhere in the world is that he can go and do his quasi-royal and sell things. And as long as in the UK he keeps his nose clean, plays in the phrase with a straight bat, there is no merching, there is no mention of jam, nobody brings a pot of jam to the king and then talks about it afterwards. In those circumstances, he then gets to come back and be part of the royal family and be what he always said he was, in Australia. I'm a working royal. He gets to do that. So he gets what he always wanted.
So, Alison, exactly. And I read that piece with great interest because it seemed to mesh with what I was A, being told, but B, was like the observable fact, right? Was that they'd done all this monetizing of their name. He'd been, as you say, I think it was actually in Ukraine where he said, I'm still a working royal, not in Australia. But de facto, they'd been doing the merching and the selling in Australia. Then they've been in, and then they're being welcomed back and rewarded with accommodation in a royal palace. It seemed very clear to me that Harry had completely won, that the king had completely rolled over and had agreed to a comprehensive renegotiation of the Sandringham summit at the very least. And I just feel like that is going to go. And let's assume, for the sake of argument, like, as I say, it's now Monday afternoon when we're recording this to go out on Tuesday. As of right now, Camp Sussex are saying, oh, the trip's going to happen. Everybody's working hard to make it happen. The operational note still stands. So just for the sake of not driving ourselves totally crazy, let's assume that it does happen. And by the way, I've said since they first started leaking this that I think in some shape or form it will happen, because I think Meghan is absolutely desperate to have proximity and adjacency to the royal family, to juice her brand again. But assuming this trip does happen in broadly the parameters that have been painted for us, and broadly they get a royal palace to stay in, and broadly they get welcomed by the king and they get to meet the king, whether or not there's a photograph. I mean, that is the end of the Sandringham summit. That is the renegotiation of Megxit, isn't it? And in a way, that's what makes it all the more extraordinary that they've chosen to blow it up in this way.
That's what I really couldn't believe, because it was clear from talking to the source that this was something they'd been working on for so long. It's not just the last time, which was, is it a cup of tea or is it the Treaty of Versailles, as someone in the palace said rather waspishly. It's not just a meeting with someone who's announced they're ill. This is a different matter. This is a visit of enormous symbolic and actual importance, whether this goes ahead or not, which is why I do think that they are going to move heaven and earth to make it actually happen. Because what my person said to me is they've been planning this since January. And as soon as I heard January, I thought, oh, because then it all clicks into place. The speech about Ukraine, and then 3 days later, there's Charles in front of Donald Trump, and then there's the anti-Semitism, and then 24 hours later, there's Charles following suit, and you can see that they're in lockstep. And my contact said, Harry's been proving that he's grown up. He's been proving that he can be trusted. Well, that was how he did it. That's the observable fact. That means that my source was telling the truth. They have been working hand in glove with some people who like them, in Charles's court. And, this is the result. This is the fruit of that. So this is not just a visit. This is not just planning, oh, where do you want to leave your suitcase? This is more. This is actually reintroduction into the family and the institution.
I totally agree. And again, assuming that this does happen, which let's for now assume that it does, I think we both agree that Meghan will be absolutely desperate to get back alongside the British royal family. And I think that's the point that I was making and picking up on. I was like, this isn't just like a isolated visit. This is an establishment of precedent, that word that the royal family love so much. And if Harry and Meghan and the kids can come back to the UK, if the precedent is that they do get to stay at Buckingham Palace or St. James's Palace or wherever they go, that is a huge accomplishment for them in terms of, I mean, I happen not to think it's a great idea for the monarchy, but it's a huge accomplishment for them, and not without massive political risk to Charles, right? Because this is so incredibly unpopular. I mean, that's what I feel like. Just talk to anybody about this on the street. It's so unpopular, isn't it, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, in the words of the hit Netflix rom-com, nobody wants this. I mean, honestly, nobody wants this. It is hugely unpopular, and you do wonder, why would you expend your political capital if you're the king on doing this? But someone has decided, and he has agreed, or he's decided, and someone's agreed that this is in the best interests of the monarchy, because all the choices that are being made are for this reason. What is the best way to protect and preserve the monarchy? And Charles must believe that making peace with Harry is the best thing for the monarchy.
And I mean, you could see his point, right? I mean, you can see his point going back to Victoria and Albert and George VI and we four and, you know, Elizabeth and her Christmases and all that kind of thing. Like, there's always been this model family at the heart of the royal family. And so it's like, you know, we're like any other family. We have our arguments and we get over it and we pull together and we patch it up. And I do understand that for Charles, he doesn't want his legacy to be leaving this family with this massive hole sort of ripped through the middle of it. But I just think that what happened this weekend with them briefing that they couldn't come unless they got their RAVEX security. I mean, if I hear one more time about their RAVEX, I'm like, guys, you're not getting RAVEX security. You've been to court 3 times. It's 6 years since you had it. Like, that's the status quo. You can't pretend that the continuation of the status quo is like a massive bolt from the blue. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but what I felt about the way that they behaved this weekend, throwing the whole thing into doubt, creating all this drama. You know, we've seen in the Mail today, actually, them describing it as tiresome psychodrama. I felt it was a really clear illustration to Charles of why it's a massive mistake to bring these guys back inside the tent.
Yeah, well, it's a massive risk. We'll find out if it's a mistake or not, right? But it is a massive risk. And this is from someone who I don't think is, is a kind of thrill-seeking risk lover. So it is very interesting to get to this point, isn't it? And, I always look at these things partly through the lens of, your own family. How would you feel? Wouldn't, you want your dad to reach out and make up and be that someone's got to be the bigger person. I talk about this a lot with the Beckham family, which is, sort of comparable in some ways. But in another way, it's nothing like, because as I said earlier, this is about what is good for the monarchy. And someone has decided that actually, no, the Queen got it wrong. It's better, actually, to make up with Harry than to have him out.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And Alison's got an amazing. Are we allowed to say about your amazing book about the Beckhams coming out later this year? Yeah. No, I can't wait to read that. I mean, that story is incredible as well. But the parallels are extraordinary. You know, they are really extraordinary. The parallels between the Beckhams and all that stuff that Brooklyn said about how he'd been commercialized without his consent. Like, all of that, it completely mirrored all the stuff that Harry said, from the witness box of the Royal Courts of Justice, when he was saying that, he'd been made to perform this role and had been put on show by this institution, and he wasn't allowed to express his own, that he was this kind of sock puppet for this bigger brand. I mean, the parallels are absolutely extraordinary between the Beckhams and the Harry situation. But I think that what I find so extraordinary, and you're very diplomatic saying that somebody has decided that this is the way forward. I mean, I think we know it's the King has decided, because, I mean, the Queen was pretty clear that there could be absolutely, no mixing of, the commercial and the public service. William, we know, I mean, both sides actually will tell you that there is zero contact between William and Harry. And I've been told and I've reported that William has very much, not directly blamed, but has argued that there is a causative link, shall we put it, between the stress that Harry put them under and Catherine's illness, and indeed his father's illness. But obviously he's more concerned with Catherine, his wife, and the mother of his children.
Yeah, I mean, Harry has absolutely heaped misery on everyone's heads, personal misery and, well, professional misery onto the institution as well. It's been, without question, I mean, what he has done, what he's put people through, people who he said he loved, and I keep remembering how close he was to Catherine as well as William. He used to glow in her company, when you saw the three of them together before he had a serious girlfriend. Yeah, they were such a close trio, just, incredible.
And I think you're right. I mean, I think the thing with Catherine is what hurt William, hurt them so much, particularly at the time of the book came out, I was told that they were particularly upset by the thing about the Nazi uniform, where Harry said that, it was all their fault, basically, because they'd laughed at it. I mean, it was weird. And actually that thing of like everything being someone else's fault, like you look at this, like they organized a tour of the United Kingdom when the status quo was that they did not have security. They'd been told repeatedly by the courts that they were not getting security. And now they're kind of blaming some weird shadowy cabal led apparently by Sir Clive Alderton, who's a sort of very affable, harmless, almost a civil servant, really. He's the king's private secretary. He's the kind of, ringleader of some stark cabal inside the palace. I mean, it just, everything is someone else's fault. He wears a Nazi uniform. It's William and Catherine's fault. He messes up his own planning for a trip to, it's Clive Alderton's fault. I mean, there's a bit in the book where he shaves his head and that somehow becomes William's fault. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? It's like the inability to just sort of, I don't know, just the sort of immaturity, really, of like just everything's someone else's fault. And
I was going to say to you, those of us who have children will know that, in that kind of toddler era, there is exactly that, where everything is blamed on somebody else. And part of parenting is you actually have to teach your children to take responsibility for what it is that they have done. It's you kind of, one of the early lessons, that one of the early battles you have as a parent. Yeah, which I don't know. Harry seems to have not got through that one yet. Yeah.
I mean, it is quite amazing, though, isn't it? That they even when they've had all of this offered, they've had a royal palace offered. I mean, and I understand, right, that there is some risk involved in whatever you do in life. Whether you're walking down the street or whatever you do, there's a certain amount of risk. But like, ultimately, they're going to be housed in a royal palace. The children will be safe. Meghan will be safe. I mean, sure, they might have to get a slightly fancier Uber from the airport than the rest of us might have to get. But it just felt to me at the weekend, like when they did all that stuff and leaked all this stuff saying, oh, actually now suddenly we can't come because we haven't got our RAVEX security. It just felt to me like a really blatant attempt and a really actually mean attempt to kind of bounce Charles, or to kind of emotionally blackmail Charles into intervening in the security decisions of the British state. And I think for all my criticisms of Charles, I think to his eternal credit, he has just consistently said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to intervene in that.
That's a line, isn't it? And Harry seems to be intent on trying to, by one way or another, get him to cross the line. So I think it started a long time ago, but last week on Wednesday, the Sun had a story that said, Harry's coming because, Pa has said it'll be okay with the security. And we were like, oh, what does this mean? And then, the palace sources said, no, there's no change in the security. So we're like, oh, okay. But then Harry is still coming, and then Harry's not coming. And it just feels intensely manipulative, as you say, very unpleasant. I mean, either he's prey to terrible irrational paranoia, Harry, or he's exceedingly manipulative and has been lying and trying to, in a bid to try and bounce his unwell father into doing something which he knows full well his father doesn't want to do. I mean, either way around, it's really unpleasant.
Well, funnily enough, I'm told that by good sources that actually a lot of this is coming from Meghan. And that while it's often voiced as Harry saying that he wants Meghan and the children protected, Harry's actually pretty relaxed about his security at home in California. He has David Langers, or whatever he's called, who is his bodyguard, who sort of follows him around. But they're kind of almost like mates, really, at this stage. And I'm told that the production around Meghan, when she goes out or goes to do various things, is much more, much more of a production, put it that way, without going into too many details. And I do feel that there is a confusion. I just feel that they don't really want security. I just feel that they really want status. And I cannot shake that feeling. I mean, obviously they want to be safe. We all want to be safe, but there's no such thing as 100% safety. And it just feels to me like they're just eternally offended that they got the status connected with the security taken away. And of course, don't forget, we saw that in the Oprah interview where Meghan said that her children had to have princely titles because that was the only way they could get security. I mean, it's complete nonsense, but it does sort of give a window into this kind of frazzled reasoning that's going on, that's always trying to make an excuse for actually what they really want is status, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of getting high on the fumes of their own victimhood, certainly. And there always has been a lot of getting high on the fumes of their own victimhood. I mean, I would say with my long decades of covering show business, and you deal with the whole status and security question, and this is absolutely true. Some people, I mean, I can tell you for now, Victoria Beckham, for instance, loves security, and the other Spice Girls go about their business with nothing approaching the security that Victoria Beckham has always wanted and has always demanded. And people do believe that this is actually because it's status, because it signals we are very important. Yeah.
Now, you probably can't talk about this as an employee of the Daily Mail, but I will just tell people that I did have an exclusive at the weekend that the judgment in Harry's court case against Associated Newspapers is expected, I'm told, imminently. I'm told it is already with the lawyers, that the lawyers already know and may even have known on Friday evening. I don't think you have to be a complete legal genius to see that Harry's case fell away in court, where he was kind of revealed really to have, if not lied, certainly misled the judge when it came to the kinds of relationships that he'd had with journalists, particularly Charlotte Griffiths and Katie Nicholl. So I think that's an added factor to think about if they're going to face some kind of legal humiliation on Wednesday or Thursday. I don't think that'll be particularly good. But obviously, Alison is an employee at the Mail. You can't. We wouldn't dream of asking you about that.
I'm involved in the case, so I will be one of the people who will be notified when it's on its way. I was dragged into it over Sadie Frost, so and I had to go to the High Court. It was interesting. The judge was getting very peeved and very impatient with Harry and some of the others, wasn't he? Yes, the timing could be really bad for them.
It could be really, really bad. And I think that in a way, what I think is that I think there was a vision where it all worked out and he was the dragon slayer again, and it was a massive triumph, and he was on the steps of the High Court and Meghan was there next to him holding his arm, and they had their Ravex security. I mean, that's obviously the dream story. I mean, we know that certainly parts of that are not happening. Of course, we're not going to second guess what that judgment will be, and I'm sure it's not a obviously a certain trepidation for you waiting for that as well. But it just feels like if you wanted a lesson on how to take how to snatch defeat from literally the jaws of victory, this briefing to the newspapers at the weekend, say, oh, maybe we're not going to come after all. And then now briefing on Monday saying, oh, yeah, we are coming. I mean, what are you trying to achieve, guys, other than to put a really unfair amount of pressure on your father to intervene in something that he's repeatedly told you that he just can't do? He just cannot do it. He cannot intervene in it.
I know, but it makes me laugh because, when you talk about the old half in, half out, I mean, that's the briefing note. It's in, it's out, it's in, it's out, they're in, they're out. I mean, as I said, as agents of chaos, they are absolutely unequaled.
I think that it's going to be one of the rooms. Okay, so if I had to put my money on it and bet what's going to happen, I bet that one way or another, Meghan and the kids are going to get that meeting with the king. Now, everybody has said to me that I'm completely mad saying that I think there might be a photograph, but I actually think that there might be a photograph. Now, I don't rate it highly. I mean, I'd say 10, 20%, that there might be a photo. And the reason that I think there might be a photo is because the royal family loves to communicate in symbols because they're very hard to misinterpret. And actually, for Charles's purpose, which as we talked about right at the beginning, Alison, when you said, that somebody, by whom I think you meant Charles, or people in his court, had decided that making peace with Harry was the best thing for the royal family to do. Well, there can be no clearer symbol that you have made peace and that you've reabsorbed this sort of troublesome Duke and Duchess than a lovely photo, kids' faces facing forward for the camera, big smiles on, I mean, it would be something, wouldn't it?
That would be the perfect time to do the big reveal of the kids' faces, wouldn't it? What I heard was that the photo, the important thing about the photo is it won't be taken by Harry or Meghan or by their side. I agree with you. I think there could be a photo, but it will be Charles. So, Harry's been told, no merching, no shenanigans. Okay. So that means no, here's our camera crew. There is a camera crew who will be following him at Invictus, by the way. Oh, yeah. I'm told. But yeah, there could easily be a photo. And it will be a sweet photo. And, who boos a 5-year-old? Nobody. You have to be a monster, right? I mean, the kids, if the kids are in the picture, you can't actually go there. Even the people who really heartily dislike Harry and Meghan, and there are a lot of them, I don't think you can boo a picture of a grandfather with his grandchildren.
Well, although Republic did it the other day at the Trooping the Colour, didn't they? The other thing about the camera crew that I've heard, because then there's this proposed trip to Althorpe, which is closed on the 10th and 11th of July, because I've been told repeatedly that there is indeed a 30th anniversary Diana documentary coming. So it seems to me like they'd be minded to try and grab some B-roll of them all going on the boat over to the island to visit the grave. I mean, of course, we had that very melodramatic description of Meghan visiting the grave in Spare, where Harry goes away and she communes with Diana's spirit, and he comes back like 10 minutes later and she's kneeling on the grave with her hands on the memorial.
Tom, were you not moved by that? I'm amazed.
I was
it
moved.
Was presented in a kind. I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, it is an awful tragedy. But it was presented in a very Mills and Boon way that did invite sniggering at the back of the class. Didn't it? Yeah.
It did.
Not in the best possible taste.
Not in the best possible taste. But I do think that I think that if they say, okay, well, we are actually going to video us at Althorpe for the, as part of this trip. How does that fit, do you think, with the geocaching? Does that, because it doesn't happen on a public royal palace. I mean, but ultimately, I think it just makes this case that Charles has kind of surrendered, really, and that he's just let them get away with it. And I think it is a massive slap in the face to William, who's really done nothing. I mean, he's asked very little of his father, hasn't he? He's put up with Camilla, he's never said a word about Camilla, despite having a fair few things to say. He's been very loyal to his father, and really all that he's asked really is that Harry and Andrew be kept away from the monarchy. I mean, I think it's tough on William, don't you?
I think it is tough on him. And what's really tough on him is that when the precedent is established, when it is that Harry is a regular visitor and, guess what he comes to say, and he's in a palace and he has this kind of security and he's comfortable with it. And by the way, we can't really stop him from doing, publicity with the Spencers at Althorpe because that's his family. And, you can't really get involved in that, dear boy. When that's all established and the king then passes, well, that leaves William in the position that he, continuation is the simplest, and anything he does, if he wants to have some self-determination in this relationship, he's going to have to really fight it, and it's going to be very difficult and make him look bad.
I completely agree. I think it's a really unfair precedent. I think it's a really unfair settlement to hand to William, who made it pretty clear that he doesn't want it. And I really feel, and I do, like, for all of my sympathy for Charles as a human. He's spent 30 years reminding us that he is a human, and a forgiving and Christian human at that. But for all my sympathy for that, I do feel that ultimately Charles's responsibility is to his heir. And whatever way you cut it, we are certainly in the last 2 decades of Charles's reign, right? Let's be really optimistic. And it's time, whatever happens, Charles is always going to be a transitional monarch. He was always going to be a transitional monarch between Elizabeth and William. And I just feel like his job in that role his responsibility is to William. It's not to Harry.
Yeah, I think that's a view that anybody reasonable would have, and that actually all of these elements that are going to have a transitional significance really ought to be done hand in glove by the King and Prince William. And I'm not a royal expert, but it doesn't look like that's happening. So that's one for another day for you to unpack what's going on and why father and son aren't more cohesively aligned.
Yeah, we'll totally get into that. Alison, thank you so much for joining the Royalist. Alison has a wonderful Substack. You can see the QR code now popping up on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on one of the audio platforms, you'll just have to Google it. Alison, what is the Beckham book called and when's it coming out?
Bless you. It's called Brand Beckham. It's out August the 13th, all good bookshops.
I literally can't wait.
There is some stuff in there about David's relationship with King Charles as well. So it is actually new and interesting. But yeah.
I can't wait. Thank you so much, Alison. Goodbye. Well, folks, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed that conversation with Alison. What was your favorite bit of the show today? Let us know in the comments below. As you know, I read all your comments, and I think we've got one of the best communities going here on YouTube. If you want to show your support even more, please do consider subscribing to my Substack, The Royalist. It's a subscription newsletter, and you get one free newsletter a week guaranteed. We do also have a membership program here on the YouTube channel. If you want to show your support, that's all it's really for at this moment in time. Thank you, though, to all of you for liking, for subscribing, for sharing our videos. We're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people. We're spreading the word and getting the word about the Royalist out there. None of it would be possible without our amazing producer, Rachel Passer. Rachel, thank you so much. And our amazing guest, Alison, thank you so much for being with us. And of course, none of it would be possible without you. So thank you to you. Thank you, goodbye, and God save the King.